You guys good now? Y'all can hear me back there? All right. I need a volunteer. Someone who can throw, who thinks they can throw pretty accurately. Any baseball players? Any baseball players? Raise your hand. Okay. Hi there. Caleb? Caleb, nice to meet you. All right. Caleb, all right. What is a big number monetarily for you? Like, how much is a lot of money to you?
Oh, like how realistic?
Just a lot. Just name a figure that's realistically.
I don't know, like 3 or 4 million.
$3 or $4 million. Okay, so we got $3 or $4 million. All right. If I was to stand here and I was to give you this, and I was to say, if you can hit me right on the forehead, I will give you $3 or $4 million. But if you miss and you get one shot, every person here has to give me $1 million.
Oh my goodness. I don't
Okay, you think you can do that from right there?
Yeah.
Okay, but this is not, you're not going to do it from right there. I want you to go back a little bit further.
How far?
You just keep walking. Oh, you guys have money right on this, right? Can you do that right here? Right there? Okay, go a little further.
They should probably stay
Keep going.
I can see it. I can see it.
Keep going.
You see the person walking backwards. He stands
All right, stop.
You see him now.
He's got one try. Right here. Right in the forehead.
There's always more.
You blew it.
How did you do?
But in the sound rehearsal.
All right, everybody in set. Right. Okay. I'm not going to yell again. I'm losing my voice. All right. How did Caleb do? You were hoping if he hit me, it would have been a really short lesson. So someone was saying that up here. So no, thanks Caleb for being a good sport with it. If it was for real, how many would have confidence in Caleb after seeing him throw that thing from that distance? You'd still have the confidence in him? One person. Are you related? Okay. What was at stake with David was a lot more than just money. There were lives on the line. There was a nation that was on the line. There was freedom that was on the line. How many in here, with the show of hands, how many of you have ever felt like an underdog? Like you could not do any, you just didn't feel up to doing a task, or felt like you just were not good enough, or for whatever reason? How many of you have ever felt like others did not have confidence in you in doing something? A lot of you? Most of us have probably done that at one time or another. Consider that is how David felt. He was against the odds in every way when he comes into this fight. I want you to think of David, because when we're introduced to David, who knows what he did for a living, or what he did when he was a young boy? He was a shepherd. What does that mean? He's out tending sheep, isn't he? No one ever would have put David as the person to do what he did against Goliath. And I know we've all heard the story, but I want to run through this as far as looking at some of the different things that maybe you haven't thought of before with this account with David. Here is a shepherd boy. His whole life, his whole childhood was devoted to making sure sheep didn't run away, to making sure that he could wrangle these sheep and put them in where they needed to protect them from anything that tried to hurt these sheep, and that was his entire childhood. Other than that, his brothers were all in the front line with Saul. Saul was the king at the time. He has his army that was, that would be training. And once in a while, his father would have him go and take food to his brothers. That was it. He was a messenger boy. He was a shepherd boy, not trained in war at all. And then we have the Philistines. I want to kind of set this up. This is a map of where David would have been, where David would have lived and where he would have been at the time when all of these things take place, okay? You've got, in fact, when you look at this, turn your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is where the whole account is. We're not going to read all of chapter 17. It's a long chapter, but I want to kind of set this up for where we're going with this. When you look at chapter 17, you see the first couple of verses, it mentions some of these places on here, and then now you can get kind of a visual of what this is talking about. It says, now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle. Who knows something about the Philistines? How many have heard of the Philistines? You've all heard of them, right? Do you know anything about the people at all? This was a nation, the Philistine nation, that they were built for war. This is what they did. They were out, in fact, we'll look at something in just a moment. It says the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle. They were gathered at Socho, which is, you can see on the northern part. I don't think this is going to show up but you can see right up there. And that's where their battles lined up. So imagine all of the Philistine army. I mean, just, side by side by side, depth-wise going back. I mean, that was a huge army, and that's what they did. They're gathered together for battle. They gathered at Socho, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Socho and Azekah and in the Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel, they were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side. Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And so you notice how this big valley where it says the place of the battle right there, you see Saul's camp right there, you see Socho, and so in the middle of them is just kind of this valley area. So they've got the Philistine army that have come out. They've got all of the Israelites that are gathered. And there is where all of this unfolds. Just to give you kind of an idea of who the Philistines are, they came from the lineage of Ham, and we've read about Ham back in Genesis. The Philistines are known as the Sea People. They arrived in Canaan in the 12th century, so they've been around even before Moses. And they had highly developed weapons. Remember, this is a nation that built for fighting. This is what they did. This is what they knew. And so they built all these really highly developed weapons, being a warring nation. They worshiped false gods, two false gods in particular that were very popular, and one was Dagon, and we see this god mentioned later in Scripture, and Ashtaroth. In fact, just to give you kind of an idea of just how scary these people were, hold your place in 1 Samuel, turn over to Exodus chapter 13. Now remember, the Israelites, where did they come from? Way, way back. After who were they slaves to a long time ago? Egypt, right? And God talks to Moses, sets these plagues in motion, and the Israelites are able to escape Egypt, aren't they? They go across the Red Sea, they go into the wilderness, and we get to Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17. Take a look right here. Moses writes, when it came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. What would turn the people? You think of how long were they under Egyptian slavery? Anyone know? Over 400 years. So you think there were people that were there that their whole life, from birth until getting out, that's what they knew. There were people that died during that time, and their whole life, all they knew was they were going to wake up in the morning and they were going to be a slave to Pharaoh. They're going to be driven with these hard tasks. They were going to be, and Pharaoh did not treat his people very well. He was hard pressed for these people. So they wake up, and that's their whole life. They wake up, they do all of these hard tasks, they go to bed. They wake up the next day, same thing, and that was their entire life. And so you think of all these people that finally, after over 400 years of all their ancestors or their families and so forth being under this heavy slavery, finally there comes a time where they're able to get out from all of under that. I mean, you think of just how exciting that must have been, right? We have our freedom. We are finally out from under this. And not only that, but they're able to see one of the greatest miracles that we're able to be able to read, and that is the parting of the Red Sea. Pharaoh and his armies are behind them. They're following them, and they only follow them for one reason. That's to kill them or bring them back. So they're able to cross the Red Sea and get onto the other side safely. And of course, we know that Pharaoh's armies were all drowned in the sea after it came back. Well, they're out in the wilderness. And you think of Moses right here. It says these people, he says the shortcut was to go through this land of the Philistines. He says he did not, but it says God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines. Why? And it says, and it says that they did not lead by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Can you imagine seeing a people that are so vicious and so strong and so powerful and intimidating that they would actually turn back and they would rather go back to all the slavery that they had rather than go through something like the Philistines or try to face them? That was their life. That was what they were undergoing as they were going into this wilderness. This was not just this freedom fest that they could go in and run out into the wilderness and think that everything was going well. In fact, the Philistines and the Israelites, when you start looking at all the different times that they met, had, I believe it was 7 different major wars against each other. The Philistines didn't like the Israelites, and the Israelites certainly did not like the Philistines. They were scared of them. They didn't, remember when Moses sends these 12 spies into the land of Canaan? Part of the land of Canaan would have been the Philistines. Well, they come back, and what did they say? Well, let's just go right into there, right? We've gone this far. Let's go the rest of the way and go in there, right? What did they say? 10 of the spies. How did they return with their account? What did they say? They can't do it. Why not? They're full of giants. They're big. They've got all these different people that are on every side of the land of Canaan. 2 people were able to come back with the confidence of God. Who knows who they were? Joshua and Caleb, right? Joshua would eventually become the successor for Moses. Joshua was put over the military for Moses, and for good reason. But that was all that was confident enough to be able to go in at that point. And so you get kind of an idea of just how strong these Philistines really were. And here is a point where where all the nation of Israel, being led by Saul, this king, meets up with the Philistines once again. Only this time it's different. This time, there's a man that's with them, one of these giants. And he comes out, and as we see that is described in 1 Samuel chapter 17, it says his height was 6 cubits in a span, which translation is about 9 feet 6 inches tall. He had a helmet on his head. He was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, 125 pounds. Imagine that. A man that is so big and so strong that he could wear 125 pounds of armor. He had bronze armor on his legs, a bronze javelin between his shoulders. He had the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and a weaver's beam, if you see, is about 8.5 feet long. His iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, which is about 15 pounds. 15-pound spear, just in and of itself. And a shield bearer went before him. And he had one thing on his mind. He was going to take all of Israel that day. And all the army that was with him, here's this man that, this is the guy. This is the one that comes forward, and he starts taunting Israel. In fact, remember what he said when he comes up to them, and remember all the armies behind him, and he comes up and he's standing there with the two facing each other, and there's this valley. And if you've ever been in kind of a valley area, his voice would carry, especially, you're 9.5 feet tall, you probably have the lungs to carry your voice anyway, but and so he's yelling to these people. He says, I defy Israel. And Israel doesn't know what to think. They're looking at this, they're looking at this army that's bred for war, and here's a 9.5-foot man that comes out that's heavily armored, standing among them. And then here comes this young sheep herder, David. David, at that time, was bringing food just like he was, like he'd always done to his brothers. This time, his brothers got upset with him. They said, why are you down here? Why aren't you just back, tending the sheep? And they accuse him of just being, just wanting to watch this war take place. And he said, and he tells me, he says, am I not a part of this? Am I not, part of this nation? I want to see this. I want to be here with everyone. And I'm paraphrasing, with this, all of this, but we're able to read if we were to go into here. But anyway, so David says, I'm part of this nation. Should I not be here? And then he asks the question, well, who is this guy? Who is this, who's this great warrior? And what are the circumstances that are on the line right here? And so they tell him. If you look at verse 25, it says, the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, I don't have a daughter, so don't worry, Caleb. Give him his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Your parents would probably love that. And David says, okay, count me in. Think of what was on the line. No one wanted to fight Goliath, and for right reason. It's hard for me to know very many people that would step up in a situation like that. You've got this man that is that big and that vicious and that hungry to defeat the Israelite nation. And here's this young shepherd that comes in here and he says, you know what? I'll be the one. I'll do it. And imagine the response of every person that was watching him that day. Who in the world is this kid? Who are you? Why are you the one to do this? Our whole nation is on the line right here. Our freedom is on the line. Lives are on the line. And you're the one that's going to step up and try to take on this beast? You're the one? David said, yep. Saul was even hesitant, the king. He said, are you sure you want to do this? David said, I've protected the sheep before. I've protected them from bears. I've protected them from wild animals. I think I can do this. Well, this is a little bit different, isn't it? Because that bear's not standing with an army. That bear's not ready to take all of you prisoner and take away your freedom and kill probably most of you anyway. But David said, I've done this. I've got experience, with something. And Saul said, okay, well, you go out there, you're going to have to do it the right way. And so he says, I want you to wear this. And he puts this armor on David. David starts wearing this, and he just never wore it before. He's untrained for war. And he's thinking, what am I supposed to do with this? I can't move. And he tells Saul, I can't wear this. It's too heavy. He says, take it off. And just imagine what these people must be looking at and thinking now. So you've got this young shepherd kid against a 9.5-foot giant with all of this stuff right here that he's wearing. His arm bearer comes before him with the shield, and you think of just how big that was. And David said, I can't wear armor. It's just going to restrict me. But I'll tell you what so you think of, what they hand them the sword. No, I can't use that. What do you have, David? I've got my slingshot. What? You're going to face this guy with a slingshot. We've got men that have swords. We have men that have armor. They have their shields. We have men that are trained at least to try to give us a chance. You're going to use a slingshot. Yep. And then David lets it be known why he could have that much confidence. He said, you see, it's not just me that's going against him. I'm going against him with God. I don't know what the spiritual state was of every person that was there that day. But even when someone like that, when they come with, they are that confident with God, there had to be some kind of reservation with it. The nation was on the line. This battle could have been the thing that ended everything. And David comes forward and says, nope, don't want any, no armor, no anything. I've got my sling and I've got God. And as long as I have that, I'm ready to go. And then it happens. Just before that, remember what he collected? These stones. You ever read that he used all those stones up? He didn't fling one after another. You think when we read in Scripture, how many stones did he use? You had one. And why wouldn't you? Because that's all you have time to do. You think about this. You miss with that one stone, and that entire Philistine army is running your way. That's it. Goliath is going to be leading the charge, and the battle ensues. He's got one chance to make things happen. One shot to make something happen with this. And you've got Goliath right here, who's standing. David is, by the way, a sling, if you were to look at it. And slings were used at different points at different times in when people would fight and so forth. It was actually used as, it was a range weapon, which gives us kind of an indication of there was some distance between them that David would use this. Now, here's the reason why I had Caleb go as far as he did, and that wasn't even as far as he could have gone with what a lot of historians think. They estimate David being probably anywhere from 100 to 400 yards away from Goliath when he did that. And so the distance that you saw Caleb go, he could have easily gone probably 3 or 4 times that much further. And you think that starts to put it into perspective, doesn't it? David had one shot with a stone to be a perfect shot. There was really only one place that would have taken Goliath down. You hit him at the knees, wouldn't have done anything. Certainly not kill him. You hit him anywhere on his body, it would have bounced off. Now his shield bearer, because he had a shield bearer, he wouldn't have had that shield to try to deflect anything. The shield bearer would have had that shield. And so the only place that he could have hit with precision, remind you, is right between the eyes and the forehead. That's the only place that he could have hit that day to defeat this giant. When you swing a slingshot, they have been clocked with different. They've tested these slingshots out with the sling that he had. They've been clocked at about 100 miles an hour. Now, if you're familiar with baseball, you know that a 100-mile-an-hour fastball from just the pitcher's mound to the catcher is, that's unbelievable. That's, not very many people are able to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And so David had to be, David being anywhere from 100 to 300 yards away, had one chance to fling that rock as fast as he possibly could, when, let's assume that it was 100 miles an hour, and hit Goliath in the only place that he was vulnerable on that occasion. And that's exactly what he did. The only shot that he could have taken. David had God on his side. David said, that's all I need. That's all I need in a situation like this, is God on my side. Andy did a great job talking about Gideon, how God was on his side. Think of all these battles that were in the Bible, and the Bible has a lot of battles that we're able to see. And you think every single one of them, going into Canaan, when Joshua took all of them into Canaan, and they went from town to town, and they just battled one. They came into Jericho. The odds were stacked against them with Jericho. Jericho was heavily fortified. What happens? They defeat Jericho, then they go on, they defeat Ai, and then they go on these campaigns all the way through Canaan, and every single time that they defeat one, Joshua is constantly calling on God, because he knew because God promised beforehand, if you follow me, and this conditional statement had sat with them for as long as they could remember. If you follow me, if you're faithful to me, I will be with you everywhere you go and with everything that you have to face. And that's what David was looking at that day, that there was nothing that would have been standing in his way. Not with God on his side. Can you imagine the reaction of the people? Watching that rock first hit Goliath in the one place and dropping the greatest warrior that they had on their side. And when you look at verse 51, not only did David strike him and watch him fall, that must have been enough for them. Just imagine the horror. What just happened? Well, so much for this guy. He was supposed to be leading us. Can you imagine the morale of just instantaneously of of all of those Philistine warriors, seeing him drop? But David wasn't done. David walks up to him. They saw, here's this young shepherd, no armor on. The Philistines, saw this all. And he walks up to the body. In verse 51, it says, David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword. Oh, now he takes his sword. Only it was a Philistine's sword. Drew it out of its sheath, killed him. What did he do? Cut off his head. Whack. That was a sign of when someone did that, and they would do this in different settings as well, to cut the head off of your enemy meant you've just lost. You belong to us. Imagine David holding that head up, and it sounds gruesome, and it was, but he holds this giant head and shows everyone that you're nothing against God. You're no match. What David did that day, something was at play that was much bigger than David, much bigger than the Israelite army, much bigger than a 9-foot giant, much bigger than the entire Philistine army. Every person saw that day, some probably for the very first time, of what God was really capable of doing when they walk with him. How many within here, with the show of hands, has had something huge that you felt you could just not handle by yourself? You ever had that? Anyone want to share? Something that you just could not handle by alone. You needed someone else to help you. We've all been there. I know you try to bench 200 pounds. That's a big thing right there, because I don't think I could do that. You needed someone's help to spot you, and there's a reason why bench pressers have, why they have spotters, right? You do it? Okay. You're getting close then. But you needed that person, otherwise what would have happened? Probably you would have dropped it. Or even worse, sometimes, depending on the position that you're trying to bench press something, right? Every person has something that we've needed someone else to help us with. And every one of you, at some point in your life, are going to meet your Goliath. You're going to have your Goliath in your life. You're going to have something in your life, and it may not be a person, it may be a situation where it's just going to seem unbeatable. The odds are going to be stacked against you. People aren't going to have confidence that you're going to overcome it. They're not going to think that, they're going to think just because of who you are, that you're just, that you just take your beating or let it slide or just run away. My family and I take Taekwondo. And wherever we're trained for altercations, when someone comes and says, you know what the best way to enter an altercation is if someone tries to come up and they're trying to grab you or they want to fight you? Anybody know? In martial arts, here's what you do, okay? Person comes up, they're facing you, they want to fight you. Best thing you could possibly do. I'm not a fast runner. I hope I just run faster than someone else. That's all I got to do. But you're trained to avoid that altercation at any cost. But there are times that you won't ever be able to do that. You're going to meet your Goliath at some point in your life, and some may have already done that. Whether it's an experience with friends or family or school, whatever the case might be. And the greatest thing that you have on your side with you is God. You take God with you, and there's not a friend that is going to be closer to you. And we have good friends, don't we? We're here with our good friends today. And we're glad that we can lean on our friends, and we're glad that we can lean on our families because our friends do care about us. And if they care about us legitimately, they're working to try to get us to heaven. But I guarantee your friend will never do what Jesus Christ did for you. He went to that cross for you. He's there for you. We're calling this Youth Under Fire. That's the name of the theme of Yukon. And it's interesting because when you look at this, there could be a couple of connotations connected to it. There is youth under fire from the world. You're going to be coming across things that in the world that are just unbelievable. There are things that you're going to hear, there are situations, there are challenges that you're going to face. There are challenges you're going to face in school if you go to a public school. There are challenges that you're going to face at the job. There's challenges that are going to directly impact you. And they're going to be your Goliath, and you're going to have a choice to make. And many of you are going to have just one shot at it. You think about it. You're going to meet that one person, and you're going to have one shot to make an impact with them. One impression, one thing that you say, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? What are you going to do with your shot? Who are you going to rely on with it? There's another way that we can look at this youth under fire, though, as well. And that is confidence in the youth who are under fire. How many of you young people have ever felt like older people don't have confidence in you? And be honest. Because of your age, because of your background, you think they really, I know some of you aren't raising your hands, you're like, oh, they have to drive me home tomorrow. But you feel that way, don't you? Because of my age and because of who I am, and I've heard so many different things in the media of how, and people are always talking about the millennials, or they're talking about teenagers or even younger, and all of, they're just, and they talk down to them, and they just think, well, look who we're leaving the world in the hands of, is all these young people. You can be the ones in this room that defies all of that. Paul told Timothy, don't ever let them judge you because of your youth. I don't know how old Timothy was, and there's different ages and everything, but that's not the point. The point is, you guys can make the impact. The ones who've gone before you, they were the ones to make an impact when they were your age. And then they grew up, and they're the church. And now you're the ones that can grow up, and you're the church, and you can be and you can overcome those same obstacles in front of you. I want to encourage you as you go through this weekend, and you're going to hear different things said and a lot of great lessons, and you're going to come together and do a lot of different activities and so forth. I hope when you go back to your different congregations, and all of us, we have to split after this and wait for the next time that we're able to get all together. Lean on each other. Lean on your church family to get you through things. But show people, show the world that you have God with you. And as long as you have God with you, and talk to people. Lean on the people that you can, those who are older. I know in this congregation, I know there's David, I know there's Mo, and they are more than happy to sit down and talk to you and encourage you and walk with you for whatever obstacle that you have. And whatever other congregation you have, you talk to your preacher or your elders or your youth minister, or your parents or me or anyone else that can be that person, because that's who you can be. Not a single person that day had confidence in David, did they? He had one shot that stood between freedom or being slaves all over again, or even worse. And it was that young boy with God on his side that was able to overcome that and show every person in there what God can do. We've seen what the Philistines can do. We've seen what this world can do. Now show them what God can do. That's the impact that you can make. Appreciate your time, you guys. I will turn it back over to John down here.